Today we're going to be creating this reindeer ornament stuffy, and I've created two file types for the pattern. If you have a cutting machine, such as a Cricut or a Silhouette, I've created an SVG file so that you can have it cut for you the pattern pieces. So these are some of the pieces. This one I already stuck to the felt, and same with the antlers. These are already still on the paper backing, but you can have it cut it for you and then just peel them and stick them to the felt so that you can cut out the pieces. Or if you don't have a cutting machine, I've also created a PDF file so that you can print it to your printer and then cut these pieces out and place them over your felt and also cut. So these are kind of what the pieces look like if you're using the PDF, which is probably what most of you will be using. So this one I already cut out. And I'm going to show a little bit of both so that you can see kind of how you might have to manage each of them depending on what you're using. So one thing I wanted to point out was on the body here, it shows up better on the PDF print. There's some tiny slits here by the ears, and you really can't see that on the video, especially when you're cutting into vinyl, but they are there. So when you go to peel that off, if you are going to be using a cutting machine to cut this pattern into vinyl, you just want to be careful when you're peeling this away that you don't pull this way and tear that slit even further back, because it is a defined size that we want. So you just want to be careful when you're peeling it. So as you see, if I just were to keep peeling this way, I'm going to tear that. So we'll want to grab it from this side and peel down. So if you've cut it into vinyl, you can just peel these and stick them to your felt so that you can then cut around them. Got that a little close to the edge there. I'm just going to reset that. And then if you're using the PDF pattern, you would just cut this out and then place it over your felt. And I find it's easiest to then tape it to your felt so it doesn't move as you're trying to cut it. And I will show you with this one. We're gonna use that as the paper version so that you can see. Now, if you're to use the SVG pattern, your cutting machine will cut those holes for you, and then you'll just stick it to the felt. If you are printing it out, they're still there, but there is a note on the pattern, and I'm sorry, my printer's a little weird today, so it's not printing right. You do not need to try and cut these holes out, so that's fine. You don't have to do that. But what you will want to do, because we do need some holes in there, you just don't need to cut them because that would be virtually impossible, is take your needle and start by poking a hole in the center of each of those circles there. And then you can take a pencil, or if you don't have a pencil, you can use a pen. We want to make those holes a little bit bigger, like the size of the pencil, because we're going to want to mark through these holes onto the felt. So we need our pencil to be able to go through it. So I'm just kind of twisting and poking to get that so that it's going to be a bigger hole. It's just easier if you start it with your needle because the needle's sharp. I found if you just try and start it with the pencil alone without making that hole first with the needle, you just end up usually tearing your paper. So just go through that hole you already made, twist and push to make all these holes bigger. All right, then what you'll do is you'll place it onto your felt. And then again, I find it's easiest, you don't have to do this, you can just hold this pattern here while you cut around, but I find it's easiest if it doesn't shift while you're cutting it. So if you just place a few pieces of tape on here to hold it down while you're cutting. And then we'll go ahead and cut the pattern out. I'm not going to record this because it's boring, but we'll go ahead and cut it out, and then you'll join me for the next step. Okay, so I've cut this out, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my pencil, or if you don't have a pencil, you can use a pen. The only thing I don't like about pens is if for some reason your pen all of a sudden like bleeds a lot of ink, we're just going to be making tiny little dots here. It's going to help guide us later on where to stitch the eyes and the mouth. And so if your pen were to like all of a sudden bleed a lot of ink, that probably would not be covered by these threads, and so then you would have a little mark. So I find a pencil works best, but you can use a pen if you need to. So one thing I did that I did not think of was I placed my tape over the hole. So now I'm going to have a hard time making my marks there. So I'm going to need to repunch those. So I'm going to start again with my needle. And actually I'm finding with the needle, if I just kind of wiggle it, it's just opening up the tape. It's kind of tearing the tape to the hole size that I had before, so I don't have to go back through with the pencil. Okay, so we're going to put this back down and line it up. So I guess I would say, just to save a step when you're putting your tape on, just maybe tape it in areas where you're not taping over those holes. But if you do, it's not a big deal. All right, so we're just going to make some marks with the pencil. So we're just going to go in here, and I'm just going to kind of twist it around. They don't need to be super dark marks, just enough so we can see it. I'm just kind of twisting it back and forth to make my marks. And then I'm just going to hold this and peel up and make sure I can see the marks that I made. And so I can see them. I don't know if you can. I'm going to make this one a little bit darker. I'll hold it up to closer to the camera in just a minute. All right, so here's the little dots. Again, they don't have to be super dark, just enough so that you can see them. Okay, so next I'm going to be cutting these and this. Now you may notice that I'm using opposite colors of what's in here, and the reason for that is when I go to stitch this, generally you use thread that's the same color as your felt, so it blends in better. But the problem with that when you're doing a tutorial is because it blends so well, it makes it hard for you as viewers to see the stitches that I'm making and how I'm doing it. So I'm using alternating colors so that when I use this tan colored thread, if I use it on the dark body, it'll stand out more. And then here for the white face, instead of using the white thread, I'm going to use this tan thread. So it'll stand out against the white face. And so that's why I'm using alternating colors, just so that for the purpose of this video, you can better see the stitches. But if you were doing this, you would have your antlers on the dark brown, and you would have these pieces on the sandstone, or whatever colors you choose for your felt. You don't have to do these colors. So these are going to get cut out, and so are these, and I will do that, and we will join back up in a minute. So a couple of things I wanted to point out while you're cutting is you want to make sure you cut the felt all the way through, and if you didn't quite get it, you don't want to just pull and tear it. So I'm going to show you here, as I'm cutting this, if I don't quite cut all the way, so you see how this is not cut, you don't want to just pull it. You do want to cut through, because I'm going to show you, I'm going to do it and show you what happens. I mean, it basically just tears, and then you're going to be left with like hairy leg there. So you never want to just pull it. Even if it pulls pretty easily, you'll still get a little bit of the hair hanging down, so you'll want to make sure that you trim all the way your pieces and you're not ever pulling them apart. The other thing that I wanted to show, and this is regardless of whether you're doing the paper pattern or the vinyl, is you do need to then cut those slits, which is much easier to see on this. But after you've cut all around, you're going to want to follow those slits and cut the felt along those slits. Next, you're going to want to remove your patterns from the felt. So even if you did the paper ones, if there's still a little bit of tape holding it, you're just going to go ahead and remove the patterns. So one thing I want to show you is how to get thread out of this skein here without it tangling. So when you get the thread, you'll notice up towards the top by this DMC label, you'll see the end of the thread. You do not want to pull from this end. You want to go down to the other label where you see the color number and find the end of the thread in there. Sometimes it's a little buried in here and you have to look for it. But you want this end here, and then what you want to do is you just want to hold this in your hand and pull this end, and you're going to pull out the length you need. And you'll see, you'll start to feel it pull back here, so you really want to make sure you've got a grip on that as you pull this. Not too hard of a grip because it does have to come through. But you're going to keep pulling until you have the length that you need, and then you'll cut it. So I've cut the length I need, and now I want to show you how you're going to separate the threads. So the floss is made up of 6 different pieces of thread, and depending on what you're doing, you may want 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of thread. I'm just going to start with 1. So what you want to do to separate the 1 is just get 1 piece of thread, and then pinching this in your hand, you're just going to pull the 1 thread away. And you're going to see this is bunching, and that's fine. But just keep pulling it. Just make sure this is not all in a knot. So we're just going to keep pulling away. And if this starts to get all bunchy, just again pull it apart. Just keep pulling away. And then you'll just smooth the rest of this out. So keep that pinch, just kind of come through, pull it, get everything all smoothed back out. So it's nice and neat for you the next time you need to pull another strand from it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew this white face and chest to the body. And for this, you would normally want to use white thread because you want it to match this and camouflage in. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to use the mocha brown thread because I want it to stand out for you so you can see what I'm doing. So for this, you're going to want 44 inches of thread. And you're going to use a single strand. So you're going to thread your needle, and if you have a needle threader, that's great. If not, you can still thread without it when it's 1 strand. Later we'll be doing 3 strands, and you'll need either a needle threader, or I'll show you what you can do if you don't have one. So what we want to do is we want to get both of these ends together and pull that. So we have both ends together. We're going to tie a knot. And sometimes it helps to lick your fingers and kind of pinch that so they stick together. And then we're just going to tie a knot, just like a normal knot. So let me show you here. So you see that knot? And we want the knot to be close to the end because anything past the knot is just going to be waste. And if you make your knot too far this way, you could run out of thread before you finish sewing. So just keep kind of pulling that knot towards the end. So you see we've got our knot there. So in this case, we're just going to do a single knot. There is a step later where we're going to do three knots to secure it, but in this case we can just use a single knot, and I'll show you why in a minute. So what we want to do is we want to place the white felt on top of the body. Yours would be this sand color. And then we're gonna place a little bit of tape on it to hold this in place as we're stitching, because we don't want this to start sliding as we're stitching. We want it to stay centered. So just get it where you want it. You want it so that the dots you made are facing up so you can see them. And we're just gonna put just 2 tiny little pieces of tape. We're gonna start sewing this way, so we don't wanna put any right there. So we're just gonna add some there. And then I'll put one right up here. And then what we want to do to start is we want to come in from behind, and we want to be so we're underneath this white body part. And it doesn't matter exactly where, we're just securing our thread at this point. So we're just going to come in. So I'm just under the white, it doesn't matter where, just as long as it's going to be hidden when this is down. We're going to pull this until the knot touches. Now you don't want to yank it super hard because you can pull that knot straight through your felt. So we just want it to be right up against the felt. And then we're just going to go back down, kind of close to where we went in, just as long again as that's going to be hidden by the white part. So you can see where my needle's going, and it's going to be hidden when that folds down. So we're going to pull this through. And you see that little stitch is going to be hidden. So what we're going to do on this side then is we are going to go through the 2 threads before the knot. Try and get this in focus here. So we want to go through the 2 threads that are before the knot. So just like that. And then we're just going to pull it through. And so that's going to hold this in place so that knot doesn't end up pulling through as we're stitching. Then what we're going to do is we're going to start sewing. So to start, what we want is we want to, and just make sure if you've lifted this up when you're doing that, that the body's the way you want it. It didn't kind of move because you were lifting the tape up. So I think this looks okay. So what we want is we want to come from behind, and we want to come out not into the white, but right at the tip. Let's make sure this is in focus here. Right at the tip, right up against the white felt. But we don't want to be in the white felt, so right up against it. And then we're going to pull through, and you just want to pull it so it's flat. You don't want to pull it super tight. And then we're going to go down into the white, and we want to place our stitch so it's straight down from the first stitch that we put in. And we're going to want to do about 1/8 of an inch down. So 1/8 of an inch is, if you're starting here, is this line right here. So a little less than 1/8 of an inch. So you can see where I've gone into the white here. So we're just going to pull it through. And again, we just want to pull until it's flat. You don't want to pull it super tight because it'll start to cinch. And then we're going to move this way, and we want to put our stitches about 1/4 of an inch apart. So to show you where that is, that's this line here on the ruler. So we want our stitches about this far apart. You can do them a little bit less, but you don't want to do them anymore. And you don't want to do them too much less because we have a defined amount of thread here. And if you do too many stitches because you place them too close apart, you'll run out of thread, which isn't the end of the world. You can just kind of start again with a new thread, but it's just easier if you don't have to. So again, we want to come in from behind. We don't want to be in the white. We want to be in the brown, or in your case, in the sand color, right up against that white, about 1/4 of an inch away from the first stitch. And we're going to pull up, make sure it's nice and flat there. And then again, we're going to come straight down so it's lined up about 1/8 of an inch or a little bit less, and make our stitch. So we're going to keep doing that. We're just going to go around right along the edge of the white, And if you need to check your stitches every once in a while to see that you're about 1/4 inch. And then once you get a few in, then you can visualize, you know, what a 1/4 inch is without needing the ruler. And you'll just kind of want to stay with that. And having, you know, stitches that are all spaced the same width and depth will make it look like a nice, neat stitching. But don't worry, the good thing about doing the white on white is it's hidden a little bit more. So if you have stitches that are a little too close or a little bit deeper than others, it's camouflaged in more than when you're using a contrasting thread like I am here. So we're just going to go around and stitch all around here. And again, just make sure when you're pulling that you're not pulling too tight, because it'll start to cinch up and bunch up, and we don't want that. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to speed through here, set the video a little bit faster so you don't have to watch all this in real time. And then we'll kind of meet up at the end, and I'll show you how to finish it off. But just to point out, as you're going, when you get to a point where there's some tape, do not sew through the tape. Go ahead and pull the tape off at that point. All right, so I will go ahead at this point. I'm going to fast forward the video, and then we'll meet up at the end. And I want to show you something as you're sewing. If you find that when you're threading, like your thread starts to wrap around each other and kind of get tangled like that, what you can do is just drop your needle and then just run your fingers through this, and then let the needle will kind of spin and unravel, and then you'll see, you know, when you put it together, it doesn't want to twist on itself. So you can do that every so often, just kind of pull this, just let it spin out. So we're nearing the end here, so I'm going to pull off the rest of that tape. We'll finish these out, and then I will show you how we're going to tie it off at the end. Okay, so what you want to do at the end is you're going to flip this over. And this is the tail that kind of ended up under some other stitches. So I'm just going to get that out of the way so that you can see. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle and we're going to pass it underneath that first stitch we started with. You don't want to catch any felt. You just want to be underneath that thread. And you're going to pull this through, but not all the way. So you're going to pull it till you see a little loop there, and then you're going to pass your needle through that loop. And then you're just going to pull, and it's going to form a knot there. And you just gently tug. We don't want to pull the stitches too hard. And then we're just going to do that one more time. So we're going to pass underneath that same stitch that we started with. It's kind of twisting here, so I just want to show you. We're just going to leave a little bit of a loop, and then we're going to pass through that loop. And then we'll just tighten up that knot, and then we're going to trim it. We don't want to trim right up against the knot because it could unravel, so we're just going to leave a little bit of a tail. That's fine. This is going to be hidden, you know, once this gets sewn on here, so you're not going to see if that's hanging out. Next, we're going to be doing the eyes, nose, and mouth, and you would normally be doing this in black embroidery floss, but I'm going to use this mocha brown again, just so you can see it. So while black would stand out, obviously, on the white, the black does not show up well when I'm stitching over this walnut brown felt. And I want you to be able to see my stitches. So I'm just going to use the mocha brown for all of it. And for this, we're going to want 3 strands. And we're going to want it a total of 34 inches in length. So from your floss, you would pull out 34 inches, snip it, and then from that you would grab 3 strands and pull up like I had shown you to separate those 3 strands from the other 3, since there's a total of 6. And then we're going to need to thread these 3 strands into the needle. Now, this you definitely need a needle threader for. You will not be able to get 3 strands through here by yourself. So if you don't have a needle threader, I'm going to show you what you can do. So you're just going to need a piece of tape. It'll just be a small piece of tape. And you're going to place it over your thread. So you just want the thread to be coming down the middle of the tape here. And then we're going to fold the tape in half like this. And then we're going to be cutting this. And what we want to do is we want to cut it at an angle. I'm doing a very exaggerated angle here just to explain, but we're going to cut it at an angle so that this tape ends up coming to a point. And what's going to happen is after we cut that at an angle and it comes to a point, then you'll be able to feed that point through your needle and pull the whole thing through. Now, we can't have it too wide back here because the whole thing does have to be pulled through. So you pretty much want the cut to start right on the other side of your thread here. We don't want to cut any of this thread, but we'll start right on the other side of it. It's okay when we cut at an angle if we end up cutting some of this thread off. That's okay. We just don't want to cut down here. Now, it can be kind of hard to hold this very skinny part and cut it an angle this way, so I'm actually going to flip it so I have more to hold over here, and I'm actually going to cut it on this angle. So again, we're going to start on the other side of this thread, and then we're going to cut at an angle right up to there. So we're going to start here, we're going to cut at an angle. And then I'm just going to show you this up close, what it'll look like. Get that into focus. So see how it comes to a point. And you might find you have to kind of push this together. Again, the tape might start to separate once you cut it. So kind of push it together, and then you'll just feed this pointy end through. And then once you've got it, you'll just grab this and pull it through. Now this is where I was saying if you cut this a little bit too wide, you may not be able to pull it through the eye of your needle. So we're going to pull this through, and at this point you can go ahead and pull this tape off. We don't need it anymore. So we're going to want to bring these two ends together and pull this so it's equal here. Kind of smooth it out. Some of the threads might be a little angry from pulling them so much. So we want it pretty smooth like this all the way through. And then we're going to tie a knot at the end. And again, we want to pull our knot as close to the end as we can so we just don't waste thread. And for this, we're fine again with just doing one knot because there's actually, with 3 strands threaded through twice, there's kind of like 6 strands at the end here. So this knot will be thick enough so it won't pull through. Of course, if you force it, you can always rip your felt and force it through, but just standard tugging will be okay. I'm just gonna trim that tail off so it just looks a little bit more even. Okay, so to start, what we're gonna do is we are going to come through the back, through that bottom dot that you made for this eye. So we're gonna find that dot and we're gonna come up through that, and then we're gonna pull this through, and we just wanna pull it until the knot touches there. And again, if you pull super, super hard, you could probably tear the felt and get it through, but we don't want that. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna go down through the dot that you made on the top. And then you might have where maybe one of the threads doesn't quite pull through as equal as the other, so you can just kind of come through here and pull on different threads and get that to flatten out. Now it's up to you for this part, but what I did was, you see I just did a single stitch here. This is actually considered embroidery. So whenever you're doing something that's like more for design purposes, it's considered embroidery. So I did 2 stitches. We just did a single stitch. I wanted my eyes to be a little bit thicker, so I did 2 stitches. If you like how the eye looks after you do a single one, then you can just stop there and move on to the next eye. But I want it to be a little bit thicker, so I'm just gonna go through a second time. So you can come in again, we're gonna come in right around that same hole or dot that we made, and just check and make sure we're pulling flat on the back, not too tight because we don't want to cinch it. And then again, we'll just go through around the top. It's easier if you don't go right through the previous threads. That just makes it a little bit harder to get through. So you can kind of offset just a little bit so you're not going through the same exact hole or the same threads, and then pull this through. And then again, just kind of lightly tug at all these little strands and make sure they're all laying nice and flat. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go over and do the other eye. So again, we're going to come in from behind on that bottom dot that you made. We're going to pull through. Now you just want to be careful here that you just pull this so it's just nice and flat. You don't want to pull super hard because you see what happens to his face. So we just want it to be nice and flat. And then we're going to go in through the top. We're just going to check and make sure those are all snug. They're nice and snug this time. No crazy guys hanging out there. And then I'm just going to go a second time. So I'm just offsetting from my first one. Just gonna check, make sure it's flat. And then again, we're gonna go through here. And it all looks good. All right, so next we are going to do the nose. Now, this one we don't have any marks for, so the best way to follow is from the bottom of the eye, we're gonna go straight across, and that's where we're gonna wanna stitch. So bottom of the eye, straight across. We're gonna wanna come in through the back, and I like to come just on the edge, like into the white part of the felt. Because as you can see, our nose spans from the white felt to the white. I personally don't wanna see any of this tan or sand felt. Like, I don't want to see a gap there with some tan felt. If you do, then you can take your stitch a little bit shorter, but I wanted it to span, and I didn't want it to really cover the white part, so I didn't want to go way into the white. So I'm just touching the edge of it. So you can see here, make sure this is in focus. It's kind of hard. Yeah, you can see I'm just into the edge of the white. And I've created this stitch right aligned over with the bottom of the eye. So we're gonna come up, just check the back and make sure it's flat, that you've pulled it all the way through. And then we're gonna come over directly straight across at the same height. So we want it to be nice and even, straight across like that. And again, we're just gonna go just into the white, and we're gonna pull down. Now we wanna leave a little loop before we pull all the way through. So we have this little loop here. I'm just gonna hold that down with my thumb, keep it out of the way. Now we're gonna wanna come up just into the white, and I want to be nice and centered in the middle of this dip. So we're going to come through there, and now we're going to pull this so that it starts to pull that loop up, but because we have that stitch there, you can see it's holding that down in like a V shape, which is what we want. And then to really hold it down, we're going to want to do another stitch underneath. So when we do that stitch, we just want to be careful. We don't want to go through those threads. So we just want to go into the felt right underneath those threads, and then we're going to pull it, and then that's really going to lock down that little V. So you see it coming like that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to make stitches back and forth to fill in the nose. And so we want to start close down here so that we don't end up with a gap. So we don't want to, start stitching across like that, because as you can see, we're going to see all that that felt from the body in there. So we want to start way down here. And so we're gonna just go right to left, right to left. So I don't want to come up through these threads. I just want to come up next to them. So right up next to that. And if you end up after you stitch, you see that there's a space, we can always fill it in. So it's not the end of the world. So we're going to come through. I'm just going to check the back, make sure I've pulled it all the way. And then we're going to come straight across. I'm just going to kind of scooch these threads a little bit to the side so I can get in right in next to them. And we'll pull that. And then I'm just going to keep working back and forth, back and forth. So I'm still inside of that V at this point. But once I get outside of the V, so you can see I cut it a little bit short there on my stitch, and so I can see that, but so we can fill that in still. So what I'll do is I'm just going to come back through here. I'm just going to get into the white, and even I cut it a little bit short on this side, so I'm just going to make sure I'm more into the white. I'm just going to go over that again. So this time I'm going to go all the way here. Okay, so now it spans. And then it's up to you how big you want to make the nose. I go so it's about like kind of like 3/4 of the way up the eye, but you can just kind of go until you like how it looks. So I'm gonna go just into the white, and go over the top just into the white. Okay, so one stitch that's, now you can see this is a little crooked, so that's okay, we can fix that. So I can put a stitch up here, and then I don't want to keep stitching up higher on this side because it'll stay crooked, but if I put a stitch in here and come a little bit more down, then that will level off. So I've kind of pushed it down so you can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, so that's more even with that. Make sure I've pulled it flat, and then I'm going to come across into that because I don't want to go any higher because then I'll just keep that same slant. And so you can see now that's evened out. Okay, so once you're done with the nose, then what you're going to do is the mouth. So to do that, we're doing a very similar thing to what we did here for the bottom of the nose to create that V. So we are going to come up through the dot you made, the one on the left. Just want to make sure we've pulled that. And then we're going to go down through the one on the right. And we want to keep that loop. Okay, so now I'm going to hold that loop down with my thumb, and then I'm going to come up through that center dot. And then at this point, I'm going to pull it, and again, that's going to create the little V. And then we want to go in underneath. So we don't want to go through those threads. We just want to be in the felt, but underneath. And pull that, and then that'll lock his little smile down. So that's all taken care of. If at this point you decide you want to make, a smile a little thicker, you can do a whole second one. You can still put some more stitches in the nose or the eyes. Of course, you are a little bit limited on thread, so you still have to keep some to tie off at the end, but you could do a couple more stitches if you wanted. So I'm finding that I like how this is into the white here, but it looks like I fell short there. So I'm going to add one more stitch there, so it's a little bit more symmetrical. So I'm going into the white here. And then I'm going to go through, let's see. I think I'm just going to go kind of straight through here. Okay, so that looks a little more symmetrical to me now. So what we're gonna do to tie off is we're gonna come around the back here, and we're gonna do similar to what we did down here. We just need to tie off a knot, and it doesn't really matter which thread you go through. You can really just pass through any. We just don't wanna go through the felt, so we have a lot here from the nose, so I'm just gonna pass it under some of these threads. And then we've got this loop here, and we're just gonna push the needle through that loop and come down and hold that and just kind of pull it so it's tight there. And then we'll do it one more time. So we have that loop. We're gonna come around and pull that through. And you want to kind of hold the knot as you pull it. If you just kind of pull, you could end up cinching this a little bit too much, and then it could kind of like bunch on his face. And so we just want to hold the knot and tug it. And then we can go ahead and trim. And we're done with that part. So one thing I wanted to point out is if you did want to do like a Rudolph look with a red nose, with keeping the eyes and the mouth black, you can certainly do that. It doesn't really matter what order you do it in. I do like to do the eyes first because that's a guide for me on where to start that V of the nose. But it doesn't really matter if you do the mouth before the nose or the nose before the mouth. So what you could do is, if you want the Rudolph nose with the black eyes and mouth, is do this in black, do this eye, come over, do this eye, and then do the mouth, and then tie off on the back, and then start a new set, a 3-strand with the red, and then just do the nose at that point. And then again, you would tie off at the end. So you could totally do that. So next we're going to be sewing the front of the body to the back, and we need to create the hanger, this little thing here, have that ready for this part. So for this part I use the white floss, and I'm just going to leave it as a 6-strand, and I cut off 10 inches. So you want 10 inches for that. If you don't want to use the floss and you have some ribbon or something, you can do that, just cut 10 inches. And then we are just going to tie a knot at the end. All right, so we've got that. It's going to be our little hanger. And then to sew this, again, we'll want to go ahead and tape this down just so it doesn't move as we're sewing it. So we're just going to get some small pieces here. We're going to start here on the neck. So I'm going to start by putting some tape on these pieces here. So I'm just taping the body to the kind of these appendages. So I like to start in this area here because I find, especially if you're a beginner, kind of the start and the stop of your sewing tends to be a little bit more messy, I guess, as a beginner. And because he's going to be wearing a scarf, that's going to hide that area nicely. So that's a good place to start. And plus, this area is kind of the most complicated because we have to fold down the ears and sew them. We have to sew in the antlers and the hanger. And so we want to get all that sewn, and then we're going to kind of sew around here, and then we get around here, then we're going to do a little bit of stuffing. So we want to have all those like appendage pieces sewn in to do the stuffing. We don't want to be worrying about trying to stuff and then sew those afterwards. So we're going to start here, come around to about here, and then we'll do some stuffing. So if you were doing, the sand felt, again, you would want to use the mocha brown thread so that it camouflages in. I'm going to be using white just so that it contrasts and you can see the stitching that I'm doing. So for the tan thread, for the body, you're going to want to cut 76 inches. And then we're just going to want a single strand of it. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to show you how to tie multiple knots. Because we're not going to do that little extra stitch to hold it, just because it adds a few more stitches here around the neck. We don't have a nice place to hide it like we did before, because we don't have this back layer that's just going to be hidden inside. So, and this is just also good to know for whenever you need this. So we're just going to tie a knot just like we normally did before. And then we're going to tie a second knot. And the trick is just we need to get it lined up over the first knot. So we want them all to be on top of one another. And so you just kind of have to play around with it. So here's my second knot and there's my first knot. And so I just kind of have to manipulate it, pulling that up and getting it to land on the other one. So we have like a big double knot there. And then I'm just going to do one more. So 3 total. So again, just sliding the knot along where you need it to be so you land up on that other one. So now we've got a big enough knot so that it won't pull through our felt. Again, if you pull super hard and force it, you can tear your felt, but if you're just doing normal sewing, this will hold just fine. So I am just going to trim this tail just a little bit, so we have less to worry about hiding in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start on the inside. That way this little tail and knot will be hidden on the inside here. And I like to start right at the right at the base of his shoulder. So we're doing whip stitches again, just like this, but it's a little bit different because we have like an edge here versus a felt on top of another felt. Like it's just edge to edge. So it's going to be a little bit different until you get here. Then again, it's kind of like this on top of this, but you'll see that when we get there. So what we're going to do is we're going to start right at the tip of the shoulder, about 1/8 of an inch in. And we're going to pull this all the way through. And if it gets a little loop there, just pull that other thread. And we just want this tail to be facing in. We don't want it like this. So just pull it and make sure it's facing inward so that when it's totally sewn, it'll be hidden together. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come from back to front just like we did here. And it's the same thing. We want them spaced about 1/4 of an inch apart and about 1/8 of an inch or a little bit less down. So we're going to come through, and we're not going into the white. That would be a little too deep. So on this area, you're coming pretty close to the white. So we're going to come through here. And then what's a little bit different is we're just going to be going around. So you can kind of put this in the back if that's easier for you, but we're just going to come around from the back again, about 1/4 of an inch over, and pull this through. So it's kind of wrapping around the outside. And we're just going to keep doing that. And it's a little, there's a lot of thread here, so it can kind of get in your way and things. It'll get easier as we go and it gets shorter. But, so you don't want to be coming through on this side of your thread. We always want to be on this side of the thread. And we're just going to go around. My thread's not cooperating where I keep getting one, so I need to even this out. So you see how I've got that loop as I keep pulling it. Then when I get here and I pull that, now I shouldn't have that happen anymore, hopefully. All right, we'll just keep coming through here. And I just always like to keep checking the back to make sure I'm not getting bunching or knots happening back there. And again, when you're doing this, don't pull it too tight. You don't want to cinch it because it'll start to bunch. So you're just pulling lightly until everything is nice and flat. And then I just like to keep checking, just make sure something didn't happen with my tape and things are shifting. I just want to make sure the body's nice and lined up. And just keep going along and stitching. And then I will show you what we'll do when we get to the ear. Okay, so now we're coming up on the ear. I'm still going to come from behind just like I normally would. And then this is just very similar, and sometimes it'll kind of catch here. You can just use your needle to kind of get that loop up. So this is going to be very similar to when you did the white part. So we're going to go into the ear just on the other side of this felt. So we don't want to be way up here. We just want to be, so we're just right on the other side of the face here into the ear. And sometimes you gotta watch this doesn't get caught around the legs. Now what we need to do is, remember we have this little slit here that's gonna give him the little folded ear. So we're gonna wanna fold that down so that this little triangle piece gets in this fold, because we're gonna put a stitch in there and that's what's gonna hold that down. So you wanna have that ready to go so that when you get there, you haven't stitched too far and you're like, oh, I forgot to fold it down. So just get that ready. We're not quite ready to get into that one yet, but we will be after this stitch. So again, I'm going to come from behind. Don't poke your finger. It's right there. We're going to come basically right outside of that fold. I'm not in it yet. And we're going to go into the ear again, just right on the edge of the face. Okay, now we're going to come from behind and we're going to go into that part that's folded, so we can feel that we're going through that fold there. And we're going to go into the fold up here, so just straight up like we did these, straight across into that fold. Right on the other side of this felt face. And then I'm going to get one more stitch in there into that fold. I'm right on the very corner of it. And then I'm going to go through that again. Okay, so now what we need next is we need one of the antlers, and you just want to make sure, of course this is up to you, but so that they're going this way, so you don't want to sew them in like that. You want to make sure they're the mirror image of each other. And we're going to put this down in here. I'm going to peel this tape off so that I can peel this away a little bit more so that you can see better. So we're going to want it, you see, about that much down, about 1/4 of an inch, and so we can put some stitches in there. And we're going to fold that back down. So we're in the back here. We're going to come from behind so we can feel that we're in that felt there. And then we're going to go into the antler, but again, just above the face. And then we're going to do one more stitch into that antler. So again, from behind, we want to feel, you can feel it's a little harder to get through because you're going through 3 layers of felt now. And through the top again. All right, next we need to do our little hanger. So we're going to want to put this in here. And what we want to do is we're going to want to have our thread so that it goes, let me get this set in here. So we've got our knot, and we're going to want our thread to be just right through here. We're going to put a thread right at the top, and that's going to hold that knot in so it can't move up because there's a thread going through there. We want to make sure that it's centered with the nose here. So I think I can come over. It's kind of deceiving because of this ear, because if you're centering it to that ear, and I think that's what I did over here. If you pay attention here, you can see everything's kind of shifted to the right. So I didn't quite center this, and I think what happened was when this was open, I was looking at that in terms of centering it, and I need to have that folded down. So once I sewed through all this, it was a little bit too late, but I'm like, oh, he's still cute. So if you need to fold that down to help you visualize, but really if you just make sure it's lined up with his nose. So I'm going to bring this over a little bit more. And let's see, so I ended up pulling that out too much. Okay. So I will just want to make it so I'm going to come in between that there. So this got loosened a little bit because I was playing around, so I'm just going to tug it a little bit. So I'm going to come through. And if you feel that you go through the knot here, that's okay. We just don't want to be under the knot, but we either go through the knot or just make sure you're in between those. Now, unlike the other ones where we just kind of go around and come through behind, we actually are going to go back in here, right through the felt to lock that stitch in there and lock that that hanger in. Okay, so that's good. Next, we're going to do our antler. And again, kind of fold this back to visualize where we want this guy to go. So that looks better than what I did before, more centered. So you will have to hold that folded down. If you're struggling with that, you can just get a piece of tape. It's a lot to kind of fold and watch and check, so you can kind of tape that down to keep it out of your way. And then get your antler set where you want. So that looks good. And then we're going to come in from behind so that we're through the felt of the antler. And just make sure you don't catch your hanger in there. And then we'll go up through the antler. And then one more time from behind through that antler on the inside and through the top. And remember, if this is getting all tangled up on you, remember you can stop and do this to let it all kind of spin out. Okay, so now we're going to come from behind here into the face, and I can feel that I'm in that that ear fold underneath. Then we're going to go into the ear, just on the other side of the felt of the face. And I'm going to get this tape out of the way. And then again from behind, and I'm going to go into this fold one more time. Come from behind. Now we're just going into the ear, just above the face. And at this point, I'm not going to go into that ear again because it doesn't quite line up right. So we're just going to return to where it wraps around. peel off this tape. All right, we're approaching this arm, so I'm just coming from behind like I normally would. And now I'm going to go into the arm, but just on the other side of the body felt. And we'll just continue along. I'm going to go into the leg, just next to the body there. Okay, so once we get right around to this other leg, we're going to want to put some stuffing in here while we still have some room to do that. So when you're doing stuffing, you want to use very small sections of it. So if you put in big wads like this, it makes it very lumpy. So you want to pull apart small sections. Even if you're using cotton balls, you don't want to just shove in a cotton ball. You want to pull it apart into small pieces and put in the small pieces at a time. So we're going to stuff this in here, and we want to get it up near the head. And depending on how big your fingers are, it can be harder to get in there. And so you can use the end of a pencil or a pen. What you don't want is to have like your stitches all coming out here and really loosening up. So if you're finding it's hard to get your finger in there, just go ahead and use the end of a pencil, a pen, a chopstick, you know, whatever you have, kind of poke it in there, and you're just going to put some in, and you just want to make sure to get evenly all around the face so we don't have any flat spots. And then again, you can use your pencil, kind of spread it out, make sure you're getting it in all areas of the face. And you don't want to overstuff it, so you don't want it bulging. So I'm just kind of feeling if I have any flat areas. It's a little flat there, so I just need to get some of that stuffing further back. Now I'm starting to get the neck and the body area. And we're not going to stuff it all the way because we still have to sew this closed. So what I like to do is get it mostly stuffed, do more stitching, and then stick in one tiny piece at the end to make sure that that part's all filled in. So just kind of feel around, make sure it's kind of even. So that's feeling pretty good. Like I've got it evenly spaced. I'm going to put a tiny bit more in before I sew a little bit more up. So we just want to have enough in there so that we can still meet up the two pieces of felt and sew it together. Okay, so you can see all this kind of, ooh, I had a knot here that I didn't pay attention to. So that's going to be a little bit of a problem. So that's why I always want to be checking. If you saw me kind of going back and forth and looking, you want to make sure that you don't have a knot form and you think you've pulled all your thread through, but you really haven't because there's a knot. So let's see if I can fix this. May not be possible. Ooh, I did get it. So it was just a lot of twisted yarn, really. But what I have to do now is I have to fix all my stitches. So pull that through, pull this stitch, Okay, we fixed it. All right, so we're going to keep going here. So we're going to come from behind, just like we were. All right, I'm going to go into the arm. And your stitches may not line up exactly like mine when I say I'm going into the arm or not. It just depends on exactly how far away you were doing your stitches. All right, so if you need to, if you feel like you're lacking a little bit of stuffing right before you finish up, you can add a little bit more. And I feel like I'm good here, so I don't need to add any more. So I'm just going to continue on. So I'm going to go into the arm, just on the other side of the felt body. Okay, so to finish up, I'm just going to come back to where I started again, so it's going to be hidden by the scarf, but I'm going to come in where I did my first stitch there and come through. It doesn't really matter where. And then I'm going to go around one more time. Again, it doesn't matter exactly where. We're just going to go back to front. But we don't want to pull all the way through, so we want to leave a little loop. So this is how we're going to tie off again. So you leave that loop, you're going to send your needle through and pull it. And then we're going to go through it one more time. So we're going to go underneath that stitch. We're going to come through, we're going to go through our loop, and we're going to pull it. So now we've got a knot. Now what we're going to do is, even though the scarf's going to hide this little tail, sometimes you might be making something where you don't have a scarf that can hide it. So I just want to show you how you finish that off. So you have that little knot you created. Then what you'll do is you're going to go through the seam. So the back piece of felt and the front. We're going to go right through that seam. Doesn't matter where exactly. We're just going through the two pieces of felt, and then we're just going to come out the back somewhere. Doesn't matter where. And we're going to pull that through. And so you see now it's pulled that knot flush against there, and we don't see any tail. And then here we're just going to trim it right up against the felt. And you can just see a little bit there, but when you just kind of like maneuver and press them, it just disappears in there. So that's how you would finish off. For the scarf, you'll need a strip of felt that is 9 inches long and anywhere between a 1/2 inch and a 5/8 inch width. Then you'll take that 9-inch strip and you'll fold it in half and cut it. Then you'll take one of the strips and you'll cut fringe on both sides. So I like to make 2 cuts, so there's like 3 pieces of fringe on each side. For the white thread, you'll want 1 strand that's 42 inches in length, which you've already got cut from when you did the white felt to the face. That was a 42-inch cut, so you can just pull one of the strands from that. Then you'll tie a single knot at the end. Next, you'll place your reindeer on top of the felt that does not have the fringe on it, and then take the fringe piece and place it like this. Then fold the right side in and then the left side over that. Later we'll end up sewing this flap down so it looks like this. The stitches that we're putting in next are only going to be going into the felt that's going around his neck. We're not going to be going into the fringe part at all. So you're going to want to go in from the back side and then go through the 2 layers of felt that are going around his neck. So don't get through any of the fringe part yet. And then you're going to pull the needle through until the knot touches. And then we're going to go around and go through the 2 threads before the knot, just like we've done in other instances. I'm going to go ahead and trim a little bit of this tail off just so there's not so much thread to look at, since we're going to be stitching in such a small area. I don't want you to get confused. So pull the thread so that that stitch is snug, and then we're going to go through the top now of those 2 layers of felt. So we're just going through the felt that's going around his neck, not into that fringe piece. So go through the 2 layers from the front to the back, and then you'll go ahead and pull that through. and pull it snug, and then we're going to pass the needle underneath that stitch, and then we're going to pull it and leave a little bit of a loop, and we're going to go through the loop to create a knot. Then pull the knot snug, and then we're going to pass the needle underneath that stitch one more time and leave a loop, and then go through the loop to create a second knot. Pull the knot snug, and then go ahead and trim off the thread, leaving just a small tail. Using the same thread that's already in your needle, go ahead and tie a single knot at the end. Next, we're going to embroider the snowflake on the scarf, so we need to figure out how we want the scarf to lay, and that's just personal preference. So you can arrange it however you like. I like mine so that it's not even like this. I like it so that the one section of the scarf is a little bit higher than the other. So you can just pull it up and down and just the way you want, so that's how I like it. We want the bottom of the snowflake to line up with the bottom of the scarf part that's going around his neck. So that's where we're looking at to determine where our first stitch is going to go. So we're going to come in from the back so that it's basically lined up with the bottom of the scarf that's going around his neck. So we're going in from the back only through the fringe portion of the front of the scarf. We're not going through the part that's going around his neck. So just that one layer, and then you're going to pull the knot up to the back. Don't pull too hard. You don't want to pull the knot through the felt. And then we're going to go from the top to the back. So we're going to start along the top, and we don't want it to be too high because we don't want it to be on that part that folds around his scarf. And we want to make sure that the stitch that we're putting in is directly straight up from the stitch we put on the bottom. So it'll be a straight line up. Again, make sure you don't pull too hard because you don't want to pull that knot through the felt. Next, we're coming in through the back on the right hand side. So we're basically going to make like a plus sign here. Next, we're going to do a diagonal line. So we're going to start in the lower left-hand corner. We'll come through the back, and then we'll go diagonally across and go from the front to the back. I'm just checking to make sure my tail isn't caught somewhere. It is, so I'm just going to clear that out. Now we're going to do our final diagonal line. We're going to go through the back, but we're going to start in the top left side, so that we're going to end up finishing down on the bottom right. Again, I'm just clearing that tail from my stitch. Now we're going to pass our needle through the two threads that are just before that knot from the very first stitch we put in, so just like we've done many times before. Then I'm going to trim that tail a little bit shorter so it doesn't stick out the side of the scarf. Now at this point you can do final adjustments to your scarf to get it to lay how you like, so you can just kind of tug it up or down, and then I like mine to be a little bit slanted, so just get it the way that you want it, and then we will put our final stitch in. So for this part, we're going to pass our needle through the felt that's wrapped around his neck. So we're going to go not underneath a stitch, but actually through the felt. We're going to go from right to left. We're going to go through both of those layers of felt that are going around his neck. So pass it through. And then when you pull the thread, that'll cinch it down. And then you'll lift up the bottom of the scarf, but you don't want to pull it up because you don't want to undo that cinch that you just did, but lift it up so that you can see, and then you're going to pass your needle through a stitch, not through the felt this time, but through a stitch, and you're going to pull it so there's a little loop, and then pass it through the loop so you can create a knot. Then do a gentle tug so that you tighten up the knot. And then you're going to use your scissors to just snip off a little bit of a tail. Not too long that it sticks out, but not right up against the knot. And now you've got an adorable hand-stitched reindeer ornament.